Whispers among the olive trees. The rental car sputtered on the narrow road as Alessandro Moretti gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles whitening with each curve of the coastal path. The Sicilian sun beat down mercilessly, mocking his dark mood with its cheerfulness. 3 months ago, he had been conducting at La Scala in Milan, his name whispered with reverence in concert halls across Europe. Now, he was a man in exile, fleeing the whispers of a different kind. "You've arrived at your destination," announced the GPS in a pleasant female voice that irritated him immensely. The stone cottage appeared between 2 ancient olive trees, modest but charming with its faded blue shutters and terracotta roof. It looked nothing like his minimalist penthouse in Milan, and that was precisely the point. Alessandro needed to disappear. He stepped out of the car, the scent of salt and wild herbs immediately filling his nostrils. The village of Belfiore clung to the hillside below, white houses clustered around a small church spire, the Mediterranean a brilliant azure in the distance. It was beautiful, but beauty had lost its ability to move him lately. "You must be the musician," called a voice from behind the cottage. Alessandro turned to find an elderly man approaching, leaning on a gnarled walking stick. "I prefer composer," he replied stiffly. "Alessandro Moretti." The old man's eyes twinkled. "We know who you are, Signor Moretti. News travels even to sleepy villages. I am Paolo, your neighbor. I've left some essentials in your kitchen." Alessandro nodded tersely, annoyed that his notoriety had preceded him even here. The plagiarism accusations had been splashed across every cultural newspaper in Europe. Alongside photos of him with his protege Marco, the same student who had claimed Alessandro had stolen his original composition for the acclaimed Nocturne for a New Century. "The cottage needs some work," Paolo continued, unaffected by Alessandro's coolness. "The roof leaks when the north wind brings rain. Sophia will help you with that." "Sophia? My granddaughter. She manages most of the properties around here along with our olive grove. You'll meet her soon enough." Alessandro unpacked efficiently, placing his few possessions in the rustic bedroom. He had brought his violin but left his composing notebooks behind. The thought of facing blank sheet music made his stomach clench with anxiety. The scandal had not only damaged his reputation, but had also severed something essential within him, the confidence to create. That evening, he walked down to the village, keeping his head low. The piazza was alive with locals enjoying the cooling air, children chasing each other around the central fountain. Alessandro found a small cafe with a table in the corner and ordered a simple pasta and wine. "You're staying at the Hill Cottage," said the waitress, a statement rather than a question. "Is my life public knowledge here?" he asked sharply. She smiled, unfazed. "It's a small village. We don't get many visitors who rent for 3 months." As twilight descended, the sound of a guitar drifted across the piazza. Alessandro's trained ear perked up involuntarily. The melody was unusual, not traditionally Sicilian, yet embedded with something ancient and authentic. He found himself following the sound to a small gathering near the fountain. A woman sat on the edge of the fountain, fingers dancing across guitar strings. Her dark hair fell in wild curls past her shoulders, and her eyes were closed as she played, completely absorbed in the music. The villagers watched her with familiar affection. The melody spoke of the landscape, the persistence of the olive trees, the ancient wisdom of the rocks, the eternal conversation between land and sea. It was unpolished, but profoundly genuine in a way that made Alessandro's formal training suddenly feel hollow. When she finished, opening eyes that reflected the color of amber in the lantern light, the villagers applauded warmly. Alessandro remained frozen, experiencing something he hadn't felt in months: inspiration. "That's Sophia," said a voice beside him. It was Paolo. "My granddaughter. She'll be by tomorrow to check on the roof." Sophia was gathering her guitar when she noticed Alessandro watching. Their eyes met briefly across the piazza. She gave him a slight nod of acknowledgement before turning away, disappearing down one of the narrow village streets. That night, Alessandro dreamed of olive trees whispering secrets on the wind, their leaves tinged with a melody he couldn't quite grasp. He woke at dawn, his fingers itching to hold his violin for the first time in months. As the morning light filtered through the dusty windows, He heard a knock at the door. When he opened it, Sophia stood there, toolbox in hand, the same uncompromising eyes from the night before now studying him directly. "I'm here about the roof," she said simply. "It will rain by the end of the week." Alessandro stepped back to let her in, oddly speechless before this woman who played music that made olive trees sing, notes between branches. Sophia worked methodically on the cottage roof, her movements precise and confident. Alessandro watched from below, struggling to reconcile the calloused hands repairing his tiles with the same fingers that had coaxed such soulful music from guitar strings the previous night. "You're hovering," she said without looking down. "Don't you have famous composer things to do?" Alessandro winced at her directness. "I'm taking a break from composing." "Is that what you call it?" Sophia descended the ladder with graceful efficiency. "In the village, we call it hiding." Her frankness was refreshing after months of people tiptoeing around him, their pity poorly disguised as respect. The scandal had transformed him from maestro to pariah overnight. "Your music last night," he said, changing the subject. "It wasn't traditional Sicilian." Sophia wiped her hands on her worn jeans. "My mother was Sicilian, but my father was Greek. The melody blends both traditions." She studied him with those amber eyes. "You have a good ear." "It's my profession," he replied stiffly. "Was," she corrected, then gestured toward the grove surrounding the cottage. "The oldest trees here are over 500 years old. They've survived droughts, fires, wars, and tourists. Perhaps they have something to teach about resilience." The following morning, Alessandro woke to find a basket outside his door. Fresh bread, olives, local cheese, and a jar of honey. A simple note read, "Payment for enduring my directness, Sophia." He found himself walking toward the olive grove later that day. The afternoon sun filtered through the ancient trees, creating a dappled light that shifted with the breeze. Sophia was working among the trees, inspecting branches with focused attention. "The basket was unnecessary," he said by way of greeting. "Yet you ate everything?" she replied, noticing the empty basket in his hand. "I thought I might help," he offered unexpectedly, surprising himself. "As payment," Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Can your composer hands handle manual labor?" "My violinist hands are stronger than they look." She handed him pruning shears. "These trees need precise cuts. Not too much, not too little. Like your music, I imagine." Alessandro felt a strange comfort in the methodical work. Sophia taught him which branches to remove, how to recognize the signs of health and disease in the trees. Her knowledge was intuitive and deep, passed through generations. "My grandfather says you stopped composing after the scandal," she said as they worked. "He reads all the cultural newspapers." "Your grandfather is well informed," Alessandro replied tersely. "Was it true? Did you steal that student's work?" The directness of her question left him momentarily stunned. "No," he finally answered, the word hanging between them like a fragile note. Sophia nodded, accepting his answer without further interrogation. "Then why stop creating?" The simplicity of her question penetrated his defenses. "When everyone believes you're a thief, you begin to question what's truly yours. Every melody I hear now, I wonder if it's mine or someone else's memory." She considered this as she expertly trimmed a branch. "These trees don't question which sunlight belongs to them. They simply grow toward it." That evening, Sophia invited him to dinner at her small house at the edge of the grove. Her kitchen was warm and fragrant with herbs hanging from wooden beams. Her grandfather Paolo sat at the table, eyes twinkling with curiosity about their guest. "In Milan, they say you were revolutionary," Paolo said, pouring local wine. "That your compositions bridged classical structure with modern emotion." Alessandro shifted uncomfortably. "Critics are generous with praise until they decide to destroy you." "Perhaps," Sophia interjected. "It is not about what critics think at all." After dinner, she brought out her guitar and began to play. Paolo joined with a small drum. The rhythm spoke of harvests and storms, of seasons changing and returning. Almost unconsciously, Alessandro began to tap his fingers against the wooden table, adding complexity to the rhythm. Sophia noticed and pushed her guitar toward him. "Show us what music sounds like in Milan." He hesitated, then took the instrument. His fingers remembered what his mind had tried to forget, the joy of creation. He played a fragment of his last composition, then found himself weaving in elements of Sophia's melody from the night before. The result was neither wholly his nor hers, but something new emerging between them. Paolo watched with wise eyes as something unspoken passed between his granddaughter and the wounded composer. When Alessandro finally stopped playing, the silence hummed with possibility. Crescendo of trust, the village festival of Santa Rosalia approached, bringing a flurry of activity to Belfiore. Alessandro had been in Sicily for nearly a month, falling into the gentle rhythm of village life. Each morning he worked among the olive trees with Sophia, and each afternoon he returned to his violin, fragments of new melodies beginning to take shape. "You should play at the festival," Sophia suggested one morning as they walked through the grove. Alessandro immediately tensed. "I'm not ready for a public performance." "It's hardly the Milan Philharmonic," she teased. "Just villagers who'll be more interested in wine than perfect pitch." When he remained hesitant, Sophia's expression softened. "The festival celebrates new beginnings. The story goes that Santa Rosalia brought life back to Sicily after plague. Perhaps it's fitting." Alessandro changed the subject. "Tell me about your life before the olive trees." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "I studied agricultural science in Rome. I had plans to travel, to bring sustainable farming techniques to developing regions." Her eyes grew distant. "Then my mother died suddenly. My father had passed years before." "So you came back for your grandfather," Alessandro realized. "I came back for myself too," she corrected. "The world is loud and demanding. Here, among these trees, I found clarity." As they harvested olives together, their hands occasionally brushing, Alessandro found himself sharing things he'd told no one. His working-class childhood in Turin, the sacrifices his parents made for his musical education, the loneliness of success. "Marco was like a younger brother," he admitted one evening as they sat on his cottage porch. "I mentored him for years. When he accused me of stealing his composition..." Alessandro's voice faltered. Sophia's hand found his in the darkness. "Why would he betray you that way?" "Ambition. Opportunity. The music world loves creating new stars by destroying established ones." He turned to face her. "The worst part is that his melody did sound familiar. I began to doubt myself, wonder if I'd heard it and forgotten, if it had embedded itself in my subconscious." "Is that possible?" she asked. "Music is mysterious that way. Melodies can feel both new and ancient simultaneously." Sophia's fingers intertwined with his. "Like meeting someone you feel you've known forever." The moment hung between them, fragile and charged. Alessandro leaned closer, his free hand gently brushing a curl from her face. Their lips met softly, tentatively at first, then with growing certainty. The kiss tasted of honey and possibility. When they pulled apart, Sophia's amber eyes reflected the moonlight. "I didn't expect you," she whispered. "Nor I you," he replied. The following days brought a new intimacy as they prepared for the festival together. Sophia had been asked to organize the music, and despite his initial reluctance, Alessandro found himself helping her arrange traditional songs for local musicians. One rainy afternoon, they sheltered in his cottage, the roof now secure against the elements. Their bodies found each other with the same intuitive understanding as their musical collaboration. Gentle explorations giving way to passionate rhythms. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets, Alessandro traced the contours of Sophia's face as though memorizing a precious score. "I'm falling in love with you," he admitted, the words both frightening and liberating. Sophia's eyes grew serious. "Are you sure it's not just this place? The escape from your real life? This feels more real than anything I've known," he insisted, kissing her again. As the festival approached, Alessandro agreed to perform a single piece, a new composition inspired by the olive grove and the woman who tended it. He worked on it in secret, wanting to surprise Sophia. The night before the festival, Sophia shared her own secret. "There's interest in our olive oil from international markets. An opportunity to expand, to share our sustainable methods more widely." Alessandro felt an unexpected pang. "You'd leave Belfiore?" "Not permanently, but I'd need to travel. To build connections. She hesitated. What about you? Will you return to Milan eventually? The question hung between them, neither ready to answer what came next beyond the festival, beyond the summer. The day of Santa Rosalia dawned clear and bright. The village transformed with colorful banners and flower garlands. The air filled with the scent of traditional foods and excitement. Alessandro felt nervous anticipation as he prepared his violin, not for the villagers' judgment, but for Sophia's response to what he had created from their shared experiences. As twilight approached, Sophia found him behind the makeshift stage in the piazza. "Ready?" she asked, her own guitar in hand. Before he could answer, a commotion at the edge of the square caught their attention. A sleek black car had arrived, unusual in the small village. Alessandro froze as he recognized the man stepping out. Marco. Part 4. Dissonance. Returns. Marco stood at the edge of the piazza, his designer clothes and metropolitan confidence immediately marking him as an outsider. His eyes scanned the festival until they locked with Alessandro's. A smile spread across his face, not menacing but triumphant. "Who is that?" Sophia asked, noticing Alessandro's pallor. "Marco Valentini, my former student." Alessandro's throat felt dry. "The one who accused me." Marco approached them with the smooth confidence that had once charmed critics and audiences alike. "Maestro," he greeted with exaggerated formality. "What a quaint hiding place you've found." Sophia stepped forward protectively. "This is a private festival." "What brings you to Belfiore?" Marco's eyes assessed Sophia with interest. "Ah, the local talent, I presume. I've come with news that couldn't wait." He turned to Alessandro. "The conservatory board has concluded their investigation. You've been vindicated, Alessandro. I've come to make amends." The words Alessandro had longed to hear for months now rang hollow in the festive air. "Why now?" he asked. "Another composer recognized elements of my piece from an obscure Romanian folk song we'd both studied years ago." Marco had the grace to look embarrassed. "It seems we both drew from the same well unconsciously. I've publicly retracted my accusation." The villagers had begun to notice the confrontation, their curious glances darting between the newcomer and Alessandro. Paolo approached, his weathered face concerned. "Is there a problem?" he asked Sophia in Sicilian dialect. Marco switched smoothly to fluent Italian. "No problem at all. I've come to bring good news and to invite Maestro Moretti back to Milan. The conservatory is offering you the director position, Alessandro. They're desperate to make amends." Sophia's hand slipped from Alessandro's as though she'd been burned. The position represented the pinnacle of recognition in Italian classical music, something Alessandro had mentioned dreaming about in their late-night conversations. "When would this start?" Alessandro asked, his voice strangely detached. "Immediately. The fall semester begins in 2 weeks." Marco handed him an envelope. "All the details are here. The apartment, the salary, the staff at your disposal." He glanced around at the modest village square, a suitable return from this interlude. Sophia took a step back, her face carefully composed. "You should discuss this privately. The festival can begin without us." Before Alessandro could respond, she turned and walked toward the stage where the local musicians were assembling. Her back straight and unyielding, Marco watched her go with a raised eyebrow. "Charming diversion, but it's time to return to real life, don't you think? Your reputation needs rehabilitation. This offer won't wait." The festival proceeded in a blur for Alessandro. He performed mechanically, his new composition feeling suddenly inadequate against the weight of Marco's news. Sophia played with the village ensemble, her eyes never meeting his across the square. The celebration swirled around him. Dancing, wine, laughter, while he remained untouched by its joy, trapped in the liminal space between two possible futures. Later that night, Alessandro found Sophia at the edge of the olive grove, staring up at the stars. "You're leaving," she said simply. "Not a question. I haven't decided." He reached for her hand, but she kept it firmly at her side. "The Alessandro I met would already be packing his violin." Her voice was steady, but he could hear the hurt beneath. The great composer, restored to his rightful place. "These months have changed me," he insisted. Sophia finally turned to face him. "Have they?" Or was this just a pastoral fantasy? The tortured artist finding temporary solace with a simple country girl. That's not fair, Alessandro protested. What we have is real. What we have, Sophia said carefully, is a beautiful movement in a larger composition. Perhaps it was always meant to be temporary. Marco had taken a room in the village's small hotel. Over the next days, he was a constant presence, reminiscing about concerts in Vienna, opportunities in Berlin, mutual colleagues eagerly awaiting Alessandro's return. The village watched with knowing eyes as the drama unfolded, the sophisticated outsider reclaiming one of their own. Alessandro felt divided, torn between the world that had defined him for decades and the unexpected happiness he'd found among olive trees and honest earth. He tried to speak with Sophia, but she maintained a polite distance, throwing herself into grove work and festival cleanup. She's protecting herself, Paolo told him one evening, appearing at his cottage door. My granddaughter has already lost too much. I don't want to hurt her, Alessandro insisted. In that moment of clarity, Alessandro understood what he needed to do. Part 5. The final movement. Dawn broke over Belfiore with gentle insistence, painting the village in soft gold. Alessandro had not slept, his night spent in composition for the first time in months, notes flowing without constraint or fear. The piece took shape under his hands. Not a careful construction, but an organic growth, like the olive trees themselves. Marco found him at the cottage, violin in hand. Sheets of music scattered across every surface. I've come for your answer, Marco said, checking his expensive watch. The car is ready if you're accepting the position. Alessandro set down his violin. I'm grateful for the vindication, but I won't be returning to Milan. Marco's carefully maintained composure slipped. This is madness. You're Alessandro Moretti. You belong in concert halls, not playing folk songs for farmers. That's where you're wrong, Alessandro replied calmly. I'm not just Alessandro Moretti the composer anymore. Here I've become someone more complete. Because of her? Marco scoffed. There are beautiful women in Milan, sophisticated women who understand our world. It's not just Sophia, though she opened my eyes. Alessandro gestured to the music sheets. It's what I've discovered about myself, about music, about authenticity. Marco's expression hardened. You're throwing away everything we worked for. The conservatory won't hold this position. Then they'll find someone else. Alessandro extended his hand. I wish you well, Marco. Truly. Your talent deserves recognition on its own merits. After a moment's hesitation, Marco shook his hand. You've changed, he said, bewildered. Yes, Alessandro agreed simply. After Marco departed in his sleek car, Alessandro gathered his composition and walked through the village toward the olive grove. The locals nodded to him with new respect, not for his fame, but for his choice to remain among them. He found Sophia inspecting young trees at the grove's edge, her hands gentle on the tender branches. She stiffened when she saw him approach. You missed your ride to Milan, she said, her voice carefully neutral. I'm exactly where I need to be. He held out the sheets of music. This is for you. It's called Radici e Ali, Roots and Wings. Sophia took the pages, her amber eyes scanning the notes she could read despite her lack of formal training. Why? Because you were right. The trees have much to teach about resilience. Alessandro stepped closer. I don't want to leave, Sophia. Not the grove, not Belfiore, not you. I want roots here, with the understanding that sometimes wings are necessary too. Her eyes questioned him. The conservatory position? Will go to someone who needs it more than I do. He took her hands in his. Your international plans for the olive oil, I want to support that. And perhaps sometimes I might perform or teach master classes. But this would be home. You would be home. Sophia's composure finally cracked, her eyes filling with tears. I thought you would choose your old life. I'm choosing a new one, with elements of both worlds. His fingers traced her cheek. If you'll have me. Her answer came not in words, but in the way she moved into his arms, her lips finding his with the certainty of coming home after a long journey. That evening, in the village square where the last of the festival decorations still hung, Alessandro and Sofia performed together, his violin and her guitar blending in the premiere of Radici e Ali. The music spoke of loss and finding, of leaving and returning, of two distinct melodies finding harmony without losing their essence. Paolo watched from the front row, his weathered face alight with approval as his granddaughter and the composer created something new together, a composition of music and life intertwined. Seasons turned in Belfiore. The ancient olive trees continued their cycle of flowering and fruiting. Alessandro established a small music school in the village, bringing students from across Europe to learn composition inspired by nature and tradition. Sofia's sustainable olive oil gained recognition in international markets, requiring occasional journeys beyond the village. They married under the oldest olive tree, exchanging vows with the same authenticity that had drawn them together. Their home became a place where music and agriculture coexisted, where Alessandro's compositions filled the rooms and Sofia's knowledge of growing things nurtured both land and creativity. On the first anniversary of the festival, where they had nearly parted, Alessandro presented Sofia with a small wooden box. Inside lay a pendant, a silver olive branch intertwined with a musical staff. "To remember that the most beautiful compositions aren't just written," he said, fastening it around her neck. "They're lived." Sofia's hand rested on her slightly rounded belly, where their newest collaboration was just beginning to show. "And this will be our greatest masterpiece yet." Alessandro placed his hand over hers, feeling the promise of their future beneath his fingers. Among the ancient trees that had witnessed centuries of human stories, their love had taken root, growing stronger with each season, branching outward while remaining true to its essential melody. "The first movement of many," Alessandro agreed, kissing her as the Mediterranean sunset painted the grove in gold, and the evening breeze carried the whisper of music yet to be written.